Hello, how's everyone doing tonight? So tonight I have a very special guest that's going to be joining me, and that guest is Beth Lambert. And Beth is the author of A Compromised Generation, really good book. So let me just find Beth here and bring her on. But in the meantime, let me know where you're from. And Beth is going to be sharing some really great information, not only what's going on with our children today, but also what we can do to help our children. So if you know anybody, if you have friends or family with children, please share this so they can see this too. But just a minute, so stay with me. Hey, Lindsay. Hey, Beth.
Hi there. How are you?
Great. How's it going?
Good. Good. Is the audio okay on this?
Yeah, sounding good.
Oh, good. Good.
Good. Yeah. So thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm excited to talk about my favorite topic.
Yeah, me too. Well, I'm happy to share all of your knowledge and wisdom and all the stuff that you've learned over this past decade of your life. So real quick, just a short story of how Beth and I met. About a year and a half ago, I went to this event called Nourish Vermont, and Beth was one of the speakers there. I drove up. I got there probably about 10, 15 minutes into Beth's talk, and I met my mentor, Jack Cruz, for the first time in person. And Jack was in the back of the room, and he was listening to Beth talk, and he was just nodding his head, which, if you know Jack, it's very unusual. Usually he's just not in agreement with whatever somebody's saying. But lots of points that Beth was hitting on, Jack was like, yeah, because Beth was really tying all these things happening to our children to the environment. And it was just a really great talk. Later that night, we were all hanging out. They have this inn, and a bunch of us were sitting on the porch in the dark, and we were drinking wine, and Beth walked by, and Jack said, hey, come join us. And so we were just hanging out, trying to solve the world's health problems, drinking wine in the dark, and it was a really fun time. So I've stayed in touch with Beth ever since, and I've been trying to get her to come on, and we finally found time in her schedule to come on. So Beth, do you want to share your story of how you got into doing what you do now?
Sure. Yeah. And by the way, that is my favorite event that I ever go to is the Nourish Vermont event. So I was just sort of reliving that wonderful time in my brain as you were retelling that, because it's such a great event. Anyway, I got into this whole world through my own kids, which is how a lot of people get into the world of health and wellness, is either through their own health challenges or those of their kids. So when I was a new parent, my firstborn child had some health symptoms. I mean, they weren't major, but they were the kind of thing that, I would go from doctor to doctor looking for help to resolve various health issues that she had. And I pretty much only got offered, some kind of pharmaceutical, some kind of symptom suppressive, nothing. Whereas my questions were always, well, why is this happening? It's the kind of thing that, like, she had eczema, but nobody in my family ever had eczema. And she had sensory issues, and nobody I knew ever had sensory issues. So it was these kind of like early warning mother instinct bells that were going off saying something's not right here. And at the same time, I sort of started looking around at all my peers who had kids, and it seemed to me as if everybody had a child who had something. It was either asthma or, babies had reflux, and every baby was on Prilosec or Prevacid, or, kids were getting diagnosed with autism or ADHD or autoimmune diseases. I mean, all these crazy things were going on. So I knew that something wasn't right here. I ultimately ended up in the office of an integrative physician who treats kids with autoimmune disorders and autism and all these kinds of things by looking at the root causes. Basically somebody practices pretty standard functional medicine. But to me at that time, the notion of functional medicine was like revolutionary. Like, what? You can reverse autoimmune diseases? Autism is permanent? What are you talking about? It was kind of one of those like earth-shattering awakenings. The clouds parted, the sun came out, and I was like, this is insane. And at that same time, my child, we just basically changed our diet, changed everything in our environment, and everything sort of seemed to get back in order. And she recovered from all her health issues and was fine. And it wasn't rocket science. It wasn't anything crazy we did. It wasn't some kind of, experimental pharmaceutical medication that, pulled her back from the brink of health issues.
Right.
So when I learned that this was possible, that there were all these things that you could do to reverse these chronic conditions, and that it was happening, I decided to dig deeper on this. First of all, why were there so many sick kids? And that question was burning in my mind. Why were my peers and this generation of children so sick? And then the next question I had in my mind was, well, if there's all these families who actually reverse these things for their children, why isn't this sort of the standard of care, and why isn't this available to everyone? So I was in grad school during all of this, and I decided to sort of shift gears what I was studying and just did a 180 and just focused solely on this question of why do we have so many sick kids and what can we do about it? So I wrote a book, A Compromised Generation, which again catalogs all the environmental things, the things that have changed in the last 10, 15, 20, 75 years or more that have precipitated this health crisis. And it's not just our kids, but of course that's my laser beam focus is on our kids, because they're most acutely affected. They're affected in greater numbers than we've ever seen before. And the thing that's so amazing about this whole epidemic of the new childhood disorders is that they're reversible in many, many kids. And kids are so young and they're so resilient and they have this amazing capacity to heal. So we should be just grabbing that and doing as much as we can to help these kids get better so they can live up to their full potential, as opposed to, the standard right now, which is that you have asthma and you're going to have it your whole life and you need to take all these bronchodilators and all these 12 different medications to keep you out of the hospital. That's no way to live. That's insane. So
especially for a kid, right? Trying to have a good time and play and enjoy life.
Exactly. I mean, that's what the most insane part is chronic illness is something that old people have, who, people who are lazy and haven't exercised their whole life and been smoking and drinking and all these things in my mind that are associated with chronic illness. It has nothing to do with childhood. Children don't get chronic health conditions, right? At least ones that are environmentally derived. So that to me is the most empowering message here, is if these epidemics, and they are massive epidemics, but if these epidemics are man-made and driven by things in our environment, then that's like a no-brainer. We can fix that. This isn't some complicated genetic thing we can't handle. This is totally in our grasp and doable. So this is how I have really taken on a whole new passion in life, is just trying to solve this problem, trying to help families figure out how to recover their own kids, how to bring their kids back to good health, and how we can do this for as many kids as possible. Save this generation of kids that's really sort of going over the cliff right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's unreal. If you haven't picked up Beth's book, definitely pick it up. Highly recommend it. Extremely well researched, and it's daunting. I mean, it's very heavy. It's a very heavy topic in here. And I was reading through all these statistics, and I knew things were bad, but I didn't realize they were as bad as what you document in this book. In this book, you wrote it, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago?
I wrote it. I published it in 2010, so it's almost 8 years old. And if you look at the stats in there, they're already worse. I mean, I think when I published it, it was like 1 in, I don't remember what it was, 110 kids with autism, and now it's 1 in 40. That's 8 years. That's insane.
And by 2030, it's projected to be 1 in 4. So people with kids, people pregnant, people planning on having kids, you need to learn this information so you can avoid it at all cost. And, I was finishing chapter 1, Beth, in this one sentence. I'm going to share this with the audience here. But you said it's entirely possible that we're raising the first generation of children that does not outlive its parents. And I read that, and it just hit me so hard, imagining like all the people I know with kids and the possibility of, a percentage of this generation of kids moving on, dying before their parents do. And it's almost unimaginable that this could happen in a very large number of our population.
Right. And, the other thing is it's already happening. It's like we don't have to wait till we're in our old age. You have kids who are dying of cancers. I mean, cancer statistics, which I don't talk a lot about in my book because it's such a dicey area and people don't want to talk about sort of the recovery model in cancer. But there are so many more children that are impacted by childhood cancers now than ever before. And life-threatening food allergies. Kids die from life-threatening food allergies all the time. I mean, a child who inadvertently or accidentally ingested a peanut or some milk or, something that is around ubiquitously in our culture, that's killing kids. So, it's not just about sort of waiting till, the child with autism who has complex medical conditions dies in his 40s. We're talking about, these are terrible things that happen to kids when they're kids.
Right. Right. So, Beth, do you want to talk about some of the major environmental factors that are driving these diseases that you found in your research?
Yeah, I think that the best way to talk about the environmental factors that are, contributing to the new childhood epidemics is to think of it in the terms of a term called total load, which was that particular term was coined by a woman named Patricia Lemmer, who's one of my mentors, and she's been in the field of autism for 40 years. And the whole concept is similar to the medical concept of allostatic load, which just means, an excessive burden on the body of stressors. And stressors could be defined in many ways. They could be chemical stressors. They could be immunological stressors like chronic infections. They could be emotional stressors. They could be stressors like EMFs. But the concept is that, there's only a number of stressors or amount of stressors that our bodies can tolerate. We're extremely resilient creatures. Human beings are amazing, have this amazing capacity to heal and recover from a constant assault of different stressors. But for kids, if you think about the model of like their bodies are little buckets and all these stressors are going into the buckets, and their buckets are little and they overflow much sooner than ours do. They have, less capacity to handle all these stressors. And you have 85,000 chemicals on the market that have never been tested for safety for, whether they cause cancer or birth defects or all these other kinds of things. That's one small piece of the total load on the stressors. I think, another thing to think about is that, which I think is one of the biggest factors. In fact, much of my book talks about this, which may not be the most exciting part for people, but it's what we've done to the ecology in our bodies over the last 75 to 100 years, where we have pretty much destroyed the human microbiome.
Right.
And that's all the bacteria in and around your body, and also, most importantly, in your gut, where you have sort of the seat of your health and the seat of your immune system is so much in your gastrointestinal tract. And starting post-World War II, we really started to carpet bomb our microbiome with the use of antibiotics and all these chemical sanitizers and pesticides and all these other kinds of things in the post-World War II industrial era that have really destroyed our microbiome. And that doesn't sound like anything significant until you understand how important the microbiome is to everything in health. It's not the only factor, but it's a very, very important factor. If you want to put the pieces of the puzzle into place, why is everyone so sick? The massive number of chemicals in the environment. The fact that we have destroyed our microbiome, which is actually one of our defense mechanisms. It's how we help to eliminate all these toxins from our body. The microbes actually help us detoxify, synthesize and process all of these toxins. But it's more than that. It's how we live our life. I mean, it's what you have on your face right now with the blue blocking lenses. We live in this world that's totally different in the last 7,500 years than it has been for millennia prior. Human beings are not adapted to live in the modern environment. We stay up in synthetic artificial environments with artificial light, which affect our circadian rhythms and our, and the synthesis of melatonin. We have all this exposure from electromagnetic radiation that was never there before. So it's really, I could go on for hours and hours and hours about various things, but the point is, it's living in the modern world. And it's living in the modern world is not compatible with human health the way that we're living, especially in an American society. American culture is sort of, it runs almost in opposition to health and wellness, the way that we live our lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant assault. It's a constant war on your health, right? You've got all these chemicals. You've got all these processed foods. You've got EMFs. You've got blue light. You've got just these new stresses of, kind of social media, and, we're just pulled in so many different directions. So you've got these emotional stressors on us too. So it's not just one thing. It's all these different things that we have to be aware of and watch out for.
Yeah. And it's also that we're not doing the things that our bodies need to thrive. The things that we did for hundreds of years, millennia without thinking about it. Like
Hmm.
eating whole foods that aren't, that are unadulterated, aren't covered in toxins, or going outside in nature. Like we just were out in nature. We didn't have to go out into it. We were in it. Being exposed to this, touching the earth, touching trees, all these things that people for millennia didn't have to think about is because that's what you did when you lived on planet Earth. But now
Right.
we've got this synthetic environment, synthetic way of living that we have to make an effort to see the sun. We have to make an effort to touch the earth. We have to make an effort to eat food that's unadulterated. And that's just a condition of living in the modern world.
Right. Right. So Beth, I mean, what's the answer? What are some simple things that people can do to help prevent this, or if they're already dealing with it, to reverse it?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's really easy to get in the weeds with chronic illness. So, if you're talking about a complex chronic illness like an autoimmune disorder or autism, which is one of the most complex chronic illnesses. In fact, most people don't even know that autism is in fact a chronic illness, that there's chronic inflammatory components to autism. It isn't just developmental. It's about having chronic inflammation during your developmental years. But
Hmm.
when it's a complex illness, it's really about getting back to the basics. It's like the question is, can you extract yourself from modern life? Remember, I was mentioning that we sort of went through a little bit of a lifestyle change makeover when I realized that my child had these symptoms and that things in her environment, things she was eating, things she was putting on her skin, were all contributing to these symptoms. So we were just like, that's it. We're done with modern life. So we took everything out that we could, we felt was contributing to stress on her body. It was basically stripping down to the bare minimum, things. Like we got rid of Wi-Fi in the house. We started eating whole foods, a whole foods diet with real fat and real protein and real vegetables and things that, it's almost like living like a caveman would, and trying to, do as many things that are in rhythm with nature.
Hmm.
That was kind of the goal. So I think if you ask, well, what can somebody do? I mean, there's a million lab tests you can take. You can be a biohacker and try and figure out, what your vitamin D levels look like. What's your hemoglobin A1C? What kinds of food sensitivities do you have on paper? Looking at blood work. What does your heavy metal toxic body burden look like? All of that you can use. And there's a million different functional medicine type doctors out there, or naturopaths, or other types of integrative type practitioners who can help you sort of solve the mystery. And I think there's some that are great at it. And if you can find one that's really skilled, that's always helpful. But without, spending your entire life savings on fixing your body, you could just shift your mentality a little bit and ask yourself, what can I do to live more in sync and in harmony with nature? I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. Your
Right.
body has innate capacity to heal. It knows what to do. You just need to get out of its way. So I always say for people who feel really overwhelmed by the whole concept of like, well, my child has rheumatoid arthritis. How can I possibly reverse that? My doctors tell me it's lifelong. They're always going to have to be on an immune suppressant drug. How do you convince that person? And I think the very first step is to just say, okay, it's like the red pill, blue pill thing, right? Like when you wake up and you realize how much your daily life and your daily living practices are impacting your health, you just need
Hmm.
to make different choices. And the bottom line is everyone's going to have to come to this realization at some point, because life is not sustainable the way that we're living it right now. Um,
Right.
and you can choose today to wake up to that and start making different choices, or you can wait and then wait till it gets worse, and then wait till your health and your child's health really tanks. I mean,
Hmm.
to me, it's just about choices. So,
Right.
but having said all that, it sounds so doom and gloom, but at the same time, I find this whole awakening and awareness so empowering and inspiring, because, if you're a parent and you walk into a doctor's office and they say your child has autism, your child will always have this. You should start, saving your money, because you're going to probably have to put him in an institution, because he'll never, be independent, be able to live independently, never be able to take care of himself. Those are the kinds of things you're told. So that's one path you can walk. The other path you can walk is to say, all right, I can see autism for what it is. It's a brain and body out of balance. And what can I do to balance that? To me, that's the most empowering choice. It's like, oh, well, I'm gonna take that path because that's a much better outcome, you know?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's all, you do have the power within you to heal. You have the power to heal your children. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they go to their doctor, the doctor gives them this diagnosis. You know, your kid has this, they're going to have it for life. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't go beyond the word of their doctor, and they just give their kid pills. It gets worse and worse, and it becomes a kind of a downward spiral.
That's right.
So Beth, what do you say to parents that are just kind of really intimidated? You know, their doctor tells them one thing, you know, you're saying this other thing that, no, your doctor doesn't know any better. This is what your doctor was taught in med school. So I don't want to like dump on doctors here, because in a lot of cases, it's not their fault. It's, you know, they're taught certain things in med school and they're not equipped with the skills that they need to deal with the different illnesses that they're faced with now. So what do you say to parents that are just, they're confused. They don't know if they should listen to their doctor or listen to someone like us?
So I think it's a great question, and I think it's something I see almost every day. And I see that the parents who prolong that recovery journey, meaning have a really hard time taking the first step on it, are the ones who never trust themselves enough to get a second opinion. Meaning that they like their doctor. Their doctor's a great person. They might be the most caring, wonderful, altruistic healer type doctor who is trained conventionally in a system that's pretty much controlled by industry. It's not their fault. You know, they could be super smart and amazing doctors. But just because you like your doctor and respect your doctor doesn't mean that you're getting the best advice from that doctor. So I think the best thing you can do is to get a second opinion from somebody who's more integrative in their training, who's had nutrition training, who's had new training in other kinds of healing modalities. I mean, I think the best types of practitioners are out there are the ones who have multiple tools in their tool bag. You know, like when I find an MD, medical doctor, who's also an osteopath, or who's also a homeopath, or who practices Islamic medicine or traditional Chinese medicine, or has other tool sets and other sorts of training in their tool bag, that's the doctor I want to go to, because they're open-minded and they have, you know, learned beyond one set of tools, you know, one sort of mindset or mind frame for how human health, how the human body is and stays healthy. So I think the best thing to do is find an integrative or holistic doctor who is interested in helping you work on the root causes. If you go to a doctor and say, all you've got for me is something to suppress the symptoms, that's it. That doesn't get me anywhere. It doesn't get me anything. You have to find a practitioner who understands that chronic illness in particular has etiology. It has a root cause or series of root causes, and usually it's complex and there's many root causes, but somebody who wants to be your partner in helping you unravel that mystery. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, I love that. So a doctor that has humility, that just says, hey, I don't have all the answers. I'm going to go out. I'm going to search out these other modalities, and is also curious too, right? Like, you know, I don't know the answer. Let me go out and find it. You know, I know it's got.
Or works with colleagues. You know, has colleagues that they refer out to. There's nothing better than a physician who's like, listen, I didn't get nutrition in my training, but I know somebody who does know a whole lot about nutrition. If you're interested in nutrition, you can go work with them and we'll work together and I'll keep learning. Like, there's nothing better than a physician who, you know, refers people out to others who have different skill sets and different knowledge bases. Like, who is an expert in everything, you know? Like, it's hubris if you think that you have all the answers about human health. It's just total hubris.
Right. Hey, so Beth, real quick, another thing I want to bring up is the cost of this. You know, I was reading your book. I was trying to add it up in my head, like the cost of autism, the cost of ADHD. It was, I don't know, something like, you know, close to $1 trillion a year just to manage these chronic childhood diseases. You know, it's funny. I was in the gym today in the sauna, and there were a bunch of dudes in there, and we're just talking, and food came up, and somebody was just like, "Oh, but it's so expensive." I'm like, you know, you can pay for it now, or you can pay for it later. And if you pay for it later, it's a hell of a lot more expensive than it is paying for it now. So just kind of, can you talk to the cost of these chronic diseases, not only on the families, but on society and on, the country as well?
I mean, that's just it. I mean, you nailed it. Basically, the costs are still there. The cost for, going the conventional route and staying on medication your whole life, the cost is there. A lot of people have, insurance coverage now where they don't see those costs because the government's paying for the cost, or their health insurance companies are paying for the cost. So the cost is transferred. So when you go into your conventional medical doctor's office, you are paying a copay like $15 or $30 or whatever. But that doesn't reflect the real cost of what conventional medicine is. So what I will say first is that it is very expensive to manage chronic conditions and to just simply suppress the symptoms. And like with something like autism, like you mentioned, moving up to $1 trillion a year to manage, it's a massive cost because you're talking about human beings who need to actually help, therapies and, extra help and support in the classroom. And there's so many costs associated with that condition in particular. But going back to what you were saying about you make an investment in your health today and you save yourself costs go down the road. And that's true for society as well. I mean, just think about it. If we took, say, let's say you invested $100,000, nobody has the kind of money to do that. But let's just say you have a complex chronic condition with your child, the autoimmune type thing. And you invest $100,000 in fancy practitioners doing integrative things, the best holistic, biodynamically grown food, the best organic, nutrient-dense food you could possibly come up with. You put all that money in the front, $100,000. If you then compare that to what expenses you would be paying without that investment over time, over a lifetime, it's a fraction of the cost to put that kind of investment in. And I'm not saying you have to put $100,000 into, to reverse a chronic illness in a kid, but I'm just saying it's the investment in today that is so worthwhile because you will not be paying for medications, therapies, all the different kinds of expenses that are associated with long-term chronic illness. We don't see it that way, though, so I think we need to shift our mindset because all people are looking at right now is the cost today. That the organic apple is 10 cents more than the conventional apple, and they're not able to see how that is basically, it's not a good trade-off to be taking the 10 cents today for a lifetime of health issues. Right.
Okay. So now that we've totally bummed everyone out with all the kind of bad stuff going on, Beth, why don't you share about your charity that you started and that you're director of?
Yeah. It's funny. I always say that I feel like the Grim Reaper sometimes because I've got this message that feels like doom and gloom, but that is not at all. I would not have gotten into this if I was out purveying this message of doom and gloom all the time. It's quite the opposite. It comes from this place of knowing that there's a better way out there and that there's tons of families out there who are living totally happy, great lives because they've decided to walk this same path. And I want that for more people, so I'm optimistic about where we're going because I know people want that they want health, they want vitality, they want to live a good life and they don't want to have their children struggle. So all we need to do is just raise awareness, wake them up and show them the way. So I started a nonprofit called Epidemic Answers around almost a decade ago. And essentially Epidemic Answers is, our purpose is to help parents find healing solutions for their kids. I mean, we really our mission is to help families bring their children back to vibrant health. We try to educate people about the new childhood epidemics and what the rates are looking like and how these rates of every condition out there are skyrocketing. But, that's less of our focus. Our focus is more on, okay, you have a child with a chronic health condition. We know how you can get your child on the road to recovery. Here's some practitioners you can go see. So we have on our website, epidemicanswers.org, we have a practitioner directory. We have most states in the U.S., so I think we have 350 practitioners. And they're all people who are experienced in working with kids with these chronic inflammatory conditions. They all have some kind of track record in terms of helping kids heal and recover, fully recover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and then we also do, education and outreach initiatives. So we have monthly webinars. Our media director, Maria Rickard Hong, wrote a great book called Almost Autism, where she talks like step by step on how she reversed chronic health issues with her son, sensory processing and ADHD type symptoms. And, she hosts our monthly webinars, and we have people on from all walks of life. I mean, we'll have a webinar on homeopathy or, herbs, or on osteopathy, or on myofunctional dentistry, or on, EMS. We had a great one with Deborah Davis one time. So there's all kinds of topics that we cover, but the purpose is to educate parents. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I love it.
The other thing that we do through Epidemic Answers is we train health coaches on how to work with families who have impacted children. And why we do that is because we think that health coaches are actually a really great bridge for people who aren't ready to go see, an integrative physician who costs $350 an hour, who doesn't take insurance. And that's unfortunately a lot of what's out there. But health coaches are kind of the people that can help you learn about the things that you can do on your own. They're not expensive. So they can come into your home and teach you, which products are toxic and what foods to eat and how to do a healing diet and how to get your child to eat when they're a picky eater and things like that. So we train health coaches through an online program so that they can go out and then work with families, because a lot of health coaches have training for like weight loss and detox and, maybe know a bunch about nutrition, but not many have training working with children. So
right.
We have a specialized training for that. So that's one of the other, big initiatives that Epidemic Answers has been pushing forward.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Great work. So, and do you want to talk about your documentary, Documenting Hope?
Yeah. So one of the sort of central projects that Epidemic Answers is working on and has been working on for the past few years is a project called the Documenting Hope Project. And essentially what this is, it comes from this whole understanding that there are all of these anecdotal cases out there of kids recovering from everything: autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, rheumatoid arthritis, whatever it is. They're out there. I've met dozens and dozens of families who've fully recovered their kids. But when you go to ask your doctor, well, I heard about this child who had, Hashimoto's and he fully reversed it. Can I do that with my child? And 9 out of 10 times the doctor's going to say, no, there's no evidence for such things. You can't reverse autism. You can't reverse life-threatening food allergies, whatever it is. So why aren't we studying that? If it happens anecdotally, why aren't we scientifically examining that phenomenon and then reverse engineering it so we can make it happen for other people, so that we can make that the standard of care? So that's essentially what the premise of the Documenting Hope Project is we're doing, actually we have several scientific studies, but the central focus is doing a pilot recovery program. So we're taking a small group of children who have one of several different types of chronic conditions, and we're giving them all the things that we feel are important for the healing and recovery process. So lifestyle makeover, getting rid of all the toxins in their environment, reducing the EMF exposures, supporting them with nourishing foods, healing diets that are bio-individual and specific to their particular nutritional needs, giving them different kinds of integrated therapeutics. So one child may need to see a developmental optometrist because they have, a convergence disorder. Another child may need to see a myofunctional dentist because they've got airway and breathing issues that are preventing them from ever getting to a place of healing. So it's a pilot program where we're basically using collaborative clinicians to work together in an integrative way in the service of one child. And we're repeating that. So it's a series of N of 1 studies, essentially.
Okay.
And this whole program, we're going to be documenting scientifically. So we're starting with a group of kids, and we're taking baseline labs on them. So things you can measure in blood, urine, stool. And then we're measuring changes over time at intervals so that we can see, as we make changes to their life, as we give them personalized therapeutics, personalized nutrition, what happens to those metrics. The markers of inflammation are going to go down. The markers that look at cellular toxicity are going to go down. You're going to see symptoms resolve. So we're doing it in as much detail and with as much rigor as possible. So that's one of our studies. Okay. Another part of our study that's part of Documenting Hope that's not as well known is a study that we're actually going to begin enrollment for in a couple of weeks. It's called the Chirp study, and Chirp stands chirp, like a bird chirps.
Okay.
And our symbol for documenting hope, I don't know if you could see it, is a bird. There it is. See, there's a bird.
Yeah. Okay.
And so Chirp stands for Child Health Inventory for Resilience and Prevention. And essentially what it is an online survey. It's massive in scope. It's nearly 1,000 questions long.
Oh, wow.
And it's got survey logic in it. So, if we ask a question, we ask parents to fill out the questions about a particular child who has a chronic health condition or a healthy child. And we'd ask a question like, was the child breastfed? And if they say yes, there's a series of questions, and if they say no, then those questions go away. It's like that kind of thing. So it's not totally impossible to do. But it's essentially a massive inventory of all the environmental factors we've just been talking about. Is your child exposed to Wi-Fi? How close is the router to their bed, their Wi-Fi router? How often is a child on a Wi-Fi enabled device? Does a child see blue light before they go to bed? What does their nutrition look like? What does their stooling look like? What was their birthing? What happened? Were they born vaginally or by C-section? All these questions that are relevant to health. And if you're an integrative physician trying to uncover somebody's chronic health condition, you want to know all these data points. You want to know this information so you can help the family begin to pinpoint the things that need to be done to help reverse this child's health condition.
Yeah.
So the Chirp study is one that we're looking to enroll 1,000 parents of children between the ages of...
How many? You kind of broke up for a second.
1,000.
1,000, okay.
Yep, and they'll be between, parents of children between the ages of 1 and 15. And who are willing to sit and answer the questions. And in return for them sitting down and answering these questions, they actually receive a personalized health report. And the personalized health report is downloadable. And it basically has all the answers that they provided in the questionnaire organized by category. And we have highlighted or flagged things that are, quote, stressors. So as we were talking about the total load theory before, how do you know what's in your child's total load? How do I know what's stressful? The average parent is not a total nerd like I am, who sits on my computer studying the toxicity of everything in the environment around my family. Most people don't care or don't know. So the purpose of this questionnaire, it spits out the things that are potential health problems for your child. So you can download this and be like, well, I had no idea. All of these things that I do every single day with brushing my teeth with fluoride, for instance, or having fluorescent bulbs in the ceiling or whatever it is, those are problems for your child's health. And if you want to get your child on the road to health, you remove as many of those stressors as is feasible. So that's an incentive for parents to take this, to participate in this questionnaire in obviously collecting an enormous amount of environmental health data. Nothing like this has ever been done before in this kind of scope. So we're hopeful that the data that we collect can be used to stimulate more research. How much research is there out there right now on the impacts of 5G networks or of all this new technology that's coming out? We want to make sure we're capturing as much relevant new information that's coming out. Smart meters. Who's studied smart meters and their impact on children's health? Our hope is that from analyzing the data in our survey, it will give impetus to much more research to prove conclusively that these stressors in our environment are impacting our health every single day, and that we can improve our health by mitigating those stressors, removing them from our lives. So
So are you guys still looking for volunteers? If there are people, on this that are watching this, can they kind of sign up and become a volunteer for this study?
So if you want to be a participant in the study, it will be in a couple weeks. We're beta testing our software right now. We're working in collaboration with Living Matrix, which is the software company that works with the Institute of Functional Medicine. So all the functional medicine doctors use Living Matrix for their data collection and management. So we're working with them. We've got a couple more weeks of testing, but we're going to be enrolling very soon. So if anybody's interested in enrolling in that study and getting that personalized report, they can go to documentinghope.com, which is our website. And then there's a place on the website where you can sign up to get on our email list. And we'll be emailing everyone as soon as the enrollment is open. Also, if you follow us on Facebook and Twitter, we'll also be putting out an announcement when enrollment is officially open. We're very close, so it's going to be soon. So as long as you're following us, you'll be able to get a notification about when that enrollment is happening. And then shortly following that, we will begin enrollment for the group of children in the clinical program, which is going to be our first location for that is Northern Virginia. So we'll be taking a small group of children to start, and we're staggering that program. We're starting with 3, then we're going to add 2 more. So we're staggering over time.
Okay, interesting. Well, I lived down there for about 20 years. So how did you choose Northern Virginia?
Well, one of our medical directors and our program director happen to live in Northern Virginia, have a really great network of integrative, collaborative type clinicians who were ready to work with us. So that's one of several sites, and we're vetting a couple other sites right now.
Okay. Excellent. Very interesting. So Documenting Hope is the website, documentinghope.com. You have a Facebook page. Is that also Documenting Hope?
Yep. Documenting Hope and Twitter. Yep.
And
we
Twitter
actually
too.
have an Instagram account.
Okay. And Instagram.
An Instagram account. And, we had that Instagram account for some random technology reason. It got blocked and we couldn't get into it. So we started a new one. So that one's Documenting Hope. What is it? Documenting Hope for Kids, I think is what it is. Look it up. Documenting Hope.
Okay. Well, I mean, between, Facebook and Twitter, hopefully they can find that if they can't find the Instagram one.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Awesome. So after this pilot for Chirp, is this something that people will be able to enroll in the future? I mean, is this meant to be, a platform that any parent can kind of go and, input this data and get a report?
Yeah, we're not totally sure what the next generation life of this questionnaire is going to be. We know for sure that it's going to be a helpful clinical tool. Because again, if you go to any integrative physician, the thing that differentiates them from a lot of conventional physicians, besides the whole philosophy that we've already been talking about, is that they will ask you to fill out a comprehensive intake form. It's usually, it can be like 5 pages or 30 pages. And then they sit down with you for an hour and a half or 2 hours, which is unusual for conventional medicine because, I mean, there's a lot of reasons I won't get into them right now, but that's what this tool does is it gathers all that information. It's basically like a standardized intake form for any kind of integrative physician who's looking at understanding the complex picture of their pediatric patients and the complex history of it. And it's all done for them as long as the parent does it and participates. So yes, it's a useful clinical tool. We hope it has a life of its own after this besides the research phase, but we're taking one step at a time and really trying to see what can be gleaned from this tool as a research tool. But for us, it will be available to parents beyond this as well.
Yeah, I hope so. It sounds great. I mean, it sounds like, so Beth, can you also share, have parents come to you for help with their children, and then all of a sudden the parents are like, you know what, I'm doing this too, and I feel so much better as well. Do you see that happen a lot?
All the time. In fact, what's really interesting is, and I haven't been documenting this formally, although, sort of somewhat formally for the last 10 years, I've been pulling in recovery stories, people who've recovered, and we have some on Epidemic Answers website, and some of the recovery stories are on the Documenting Hope website. So we've been collecting these stories, but I personally, because people have read my book or, I can't shut up and I can't stop talking about this stuff. Like people naturally know what I do and come to me with various stories. And so one of the things I've sort of anecdotally noted is that the kids that do really, really well quickly are the ones where the parent has the ability to say, oh my gosh, I'm sick too. You know what I mean? Where the parent says, I need to get myself healthy before I can get my kid healthy. The parent who puts the oxygen mask on themselves first. And I've seen so many parents, and this was myself, 10 years ago, where all you want to focus on is, I got to heal my kid. I got to fix my kid needs help. And you just put yourself to the side because you love that child so much. You want that child to be better. But those parents are oftentimes in such a frenzy that they can't be their best self for their kid and give their child what they need. So I feel like it's an awareness that happens to many, many parents that they've got all kinds of imbalances. And that this is a multi-generational thing, by the way. This isn't like, pow, all of a sudden the kids are sick. It's like Pottinger's cats with Western Price. It's a multi-generational thing. It's been going on since You know, my grandmother was, you know, in the 1940s started taking antibiotics that disrupted her gut microbiome. She passed that down to my mother. She took some antibiotics, disrupted her microbiome. That passed down to me, and I passed that into my child. I mean, that's how these things work. It's multi-generational.
Right.
So yes, the kids are sick, the parents are sick, but the kids are also, they're these amazing gifts to us, because when they have these symptoms, they're showing us, they're telling us that the way we're living isn't compatible with health, and we can ignore it, or we can listen to them. But I cannot tell you how awesome these kids are. It's like this mystical, amazing gift, this opportunity we have to regain our health, and our kids are sitting there showing us that we need to do it, and that it's, you know, it's totally within our grasp. So that was a long way of answering your question.
No, I love it. I mean, talk about, you know, a gift. Your kid gets sick, you're helping your kid gets better, and you didn't realize you were kind of sick too. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, I feel so much better too. So, I mean, I love it. It's a great story. So Beth, can you share one, maybe two stories of kind of your favorite, you know, case studies of kids that have had just a huge reversal in their health?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I don't even know where to start. Well, there's one story that was actually pretty simple, and they're not always that simple, but simple in terms of how quickly a turnaround happened. I know of one family who had an 18-month-old that was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. Child was in severe pain, you know, couldn't walk, you know, just as she was beginning to learn to walk, stopped and regressed back. And she went to the top rheumatologist at Hartford Hospital, and this is in Connecticut, and this doctor basically said, your child has rheumatoid arthritis, they have to begin methotrexate, which, as you know, is a chemotherapeutic agent, which is sometimes used as an immunosuppressant for people who have autoimmune diseases. And yeah, your 18-month-old has to go on methotrexate. And the mom, this is an aside, moms and dads need to trust their guts, because those instincts are so sharp and so good. The mom had a gut instinct that wasn't right. I'm not putting my baby, 18 months old is a baby still, I'm not putting my baby on methotrexate. Who knows what that's going to do to her development? So this mom found a doctor, actually is a practice of naturopaths who specialize in autoimmune disease. She brought her baby down to this practice and did a food sensitivity test, which I know the food sensitivity testing is crappy. They're not accurate. There's false positives and false negatives, but nonetheless, they can be extremely helpful clinically. She did food sensitivity tests, and of course came up with a sensitivity to wheat, and I think it was a bunch of nightshades like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant, all these kinds of things. And then the child's joint symptoms disappeared when they took these food sensitivities out. Walking around again, totally fine. You know, it was a few tweaks to her diet that gave her a 180, like a total 180. And that's my favorite in terms of the speed with these things. But there's so many other great stories. I can see one of my colleagues, Colleen Simidor, is actually listening in right now. And she has a great book called The Race to Recovery, which talks about her child's experience recovering from a series of chronic conditions. So I encourage you to check that out. And like I mentioned before, Maria Rickard-Hong has a great book called Almost Autism, and she talks about her child's recovery from what she describes almost autism. So there's dozens of them, but if you go to documentinghope.com and you click on the children, there's a tab there that says the stories, and there's some amazing stories of kids who've a lot of autism recovery stories, ADHD, pandas, a whole bunch of other great stories on there. A girl who's working her way back from MS, which is so inspiring. Yeah, right? Like, and there's more and more of those stories out there. So that's the kind of stuff I live for. You know, these people who've had these awakenings, they've made total lifestyle changes, and then they got better, and now their life is awesome. And that's what we should all be striving for.
I love it. Well, Beth, thanks so much for your work. You're doing great stuff, and you're changing the world in a positive way. So, folks watching this, if you know people with kids who are struggling, having different health challenges, share this. Share Beth's websites with them and get this information out there so we can help these kids and help the parents too. So Beth, is there anything else you want to share with the audience tonight?
No, the only thing I would say is just, go on our websites and sign up to get our emails, because with Documenting Hope in particular, we've been building this project for so long, and it's because we're really trying to do the science rigorously. We just got approval from our IRB for the first study, which is really exciting. That's what enables you to get peer review and all those kinds of things that makes it legitimate science. Yeah, no, it's huge. It's really, really exciting. But my point is that I think there are people who've been sort of following the progress of this project for a long time, and 2018 is the year where this thing is taking off, and I could not be more excited. So if people are interested in following along, again, if they want to enroll in that first study I mentioned, or are interested in the subsequent study, the clinical program, definitely get on our email list, because you'll get all the updates via our emails.
Okay, so there's documentinghope.com, there's epidemicanswers.org.